this special edition of our media programs and outreach from the Office of the President. This edition is a special program focusing on security and national development in a democracy. To do that, the Office of the President is looking at the issues surrounding the security sector reform, and how we move on in a democracy. With me to moderate this discussion will be the spokesperson of the government, Mr. Ibrahim Sankare. But before we move on, first of all, we'll welcome all of you to the program. I will start with Mr. Baji, who is the National Security Advisor, retired colonel, to tell us, when we talk about ensuring security and rule of law in a democracy, we want to get his perspective as to how we deal with that within the context of the security sector reform. Mr. Baji, welcome.
Madam Moderator, to start with, the security sector reform, I would start with the genesis, is an area that looked at the traditional security practices. The thinking was that it was too state-centric. And I think we have found ourselves not as a post-conflict nation, but post-authoritarian regime. So when His Excellency President Barrow took over, he thought it deemed to use the security sector reform as one of the bases to be able to bring in the desired development and democracy that is needed. If you look at the definition and the objectives of security sector reform, you will be taught that security sector reform basically ensures and builds a security sector that is responsive to security and the justice needs of the population. It focuses on democratic oversight, civilian authority oversight, and it also looks at respect for human rights and rule of law. The security sector reform transforms the security sector to become an efficient, effective, and also to look at some of the capacities to build it to be able to follow the principles, norms, and values of democracy. So essentially, I think it is right that the government came up with this pack of security sector reform to ensure that as other reforms are taking place to transform our country from authoritarian rule to democracy, that we also have the security sector who are very fundamental in terms of, development, to be able to transform them to understand and also practice the principles of democracy. So essentially, the security sector reform has a very close link to the issues relating to democracy. It is moving us from state-centric to people-centric, and that means the needs and the concerns of the people is always paramount when we deliver, security to the people. So security delivery will always be focused and concerned with the people and the population.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baji. Before we move on to the other agencies, I think it's important to highlight that the security sector reform have already come up with a policy to reform this sector. Yes. But what is holding back the implementation of that reform, of that policy?
Actually, I think that is a good answer, question. You see, the security sector reform is a process, and the process has phases and is a cycle. I think this is where, the whole problem emanates from. People have their own perceptions, and people have drawn their own timelines, and the perception is, the security sector is slow. But the process is such that the fundamental starting point is the assessment, where you consult with the people. We must remember that essentially what we want is to move away from state-centric. So if the people own the security sector, then whatever we want to do, the assessments and the consultation should really involve the people, and that will give it inclusiveness. So from the assessment, you have the design and programming. This is the area and the phase that constitutes the drafting of the policy documents, the strategic documents, because basically I think before I get to that, I need to inform the people that when we completed the assessment in December 2017, we had some findings, and basically these findings looked at the malfunctions, the deficits, and the gaps that were existing in the security institutions. So in order to be able to address or solve those issues, we came up with recommendations, and then they were placed in 5 thematic areas. The themes are foremost, we call it addressing the overarching frameworks.
What does that mean to the simple lay person who is out there who do not understand that? How does that person understand that actually you're doing something because you come up with these frameworks you're talking about?
Thank you very much. The overarching means it is overdue, sort of. And the frameworks are the normal legal frameworks that we all have to guide us in our daily running of our institutions, like the National Security Policy, which was never existing in the history of the Gambia. It was non-existent. Then we have our National Security Strategy that was also not existing. But at the level of defense, because having done these 2 important strategic documents, the next step is there to be able to have the army properly guided. At the level of defense, there should be a defense policy. And if you look around, most of the institutions around here, starting with police, immigration, fire service, prisons, they are all housed under the Ministry of Interior. So we also need an internal security policy. So none of these were existing. So we thought that in order to have a vision and then to be able to have guidance as to how the security should perform, we really need these frameworks and legal frameworks and acts, etc. So basically these are the frameworks. Because they were not there, we thought it should be the first step. It should be the foundation of the security sector reform process.
Thank you very much. Sankara, you want to comment regarding the security sector and where they are right now, the reforms?
Based on what Mr. Baji said, and based on your preamble, and based on my little knowledge about the circumstances leading to the sector reform, I think it is significant that we are gathered here today to have a conversation about a very crucial factor in our existence as a people. When a people are at war, there is no peace, nobody can go to school, the markets are closed, everything stops. So the security sector is probably the central nervous system of any government. No government today in this world can exist absent a robust, secure security sector. Officer Baji, in his rendition, alluded to what has happened here, that normally they have reforms of a poorly worked out system. But here we are reforming a system that was a despotic regime. His Excellency President Barrow talked about the civil service and how, together with the newly appointed Secretary General, how it was also decimated. That Gambia used to have the best civil service. But like the security apparatuses, the civil service was equally also destroyed. So reform is consistent with the new policies in place. The international community also wants a very vibrant, viable, democratic state. You cannot have a democratic state that observes and respects the rule of law minus a security sector that is solid and consistent with international standards. So together with the civil service, I think a structured and reformed security sector is good not only for the Gambia, but even for our neighbors in Senegal. So this reform is very significant. It is significant in the sense that now we have men in uniform who are guided by principle, who are sworn to the Quran and the Constitution, and they know in principle what a soldier and the police officer, customs officer, immigration officer, fire officer is supposed to do. I think going forward, this is very healthy and it's good for our country. We needed this. If you listen to the revelations before the TRRC and you hear officer after officer come and testify to the utter criminality to which he participated, and you look at the code of conduct for soldiers, and you wonder whether these people actually were soldiers or they were bandits. So this is all the more why it is crucial that we have a sectoral reform in the security.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sankare. I think the most important part of the whole process is the police. The police, because it is responsible for internal security. That is why I would like to invite Mr. Joe, Inspector General of Police, to give us a gist of where we are as far as the police is concerned and internal security.
Once again, I say good afternoon, Madam Moderator and Press Officer, Office of the President. Fundamentally, this gathering today is very important because it creates us the opportunity to interact, to explain to the general public the essence and the use of security in this country. Quite often people quote the Constitution as a guiding principles to what they do. Equally shall be the same, that the Constitution provides the Office of the IGP in accordance with Section 178, 1 and 2, which entails, among other things, that is the duty of the Office of the IGP, among other security bodies in this country, to protect and preserve the laws of this country. Like I always said, many a time people will quote the Constitution as a backup to whatever they do. The Constitution is very clear. It has given them the right to do certain things, and equally it has also mandated me to do some things. And what that is to make sure that I protect and preserve at all costs. The laws are very clear. Most of the problems that I do have in this new dispensation comes mainly from the issue of permit, right to protest. The law under the Constitution, under Section 25, is very clear. It has given you the right, but the right goes along with responsibilities. And I could say from here that since I became the IGP, the issue of permit had been looked into, and I had issued a lot of permits, unlike what used to happen in the past. I remember there was one time, that was just 3 days barely to my office as the IGP, an issue of a permit request came from Dafadoy Group, and that protest was supposed to be held at Westfield. I gave out the permit, I provided the security, and everything went well. Now, my office is not denying permit for people. My office is to make sure that the permit goes along with securities. Yes, the Constitution has given you the right to assemble, to express, in whatever form. But according to Section 25, subsection 4, it has made it very clear that those provisions, or that provisions, goes along with responsibilities. Many a time people feel that at any time, anywhere, people are entitled, qualified to go out in the streets and demonstrate. From my little experience, I have not seen it anywhere in the world that any group of persons can occupy the streets in the name of democracy without the involvement of the security. And that's why that provision still remains to be in part of our laws. I keep saying to people that if you think that that portion of the law is unconstitutional, law goes through a process of amendments, and where we think that that provision or that sub-provision is not serving its purpose, it can be expunged from our statutes by way of an act from the National Assembly. But once it is kept in our statutes, it is to be referenced as a law, and people should respect that this is part of our laws. Now let's take, for instance, for the ordinary person to understand. If in the exercising of your rights, you feel you can get up anytime during the day and occupy a street, your agenda and my agenda may look different. In the exercising of your right, you occupy the streets, unbeknown to the security. I also, in the exercising of my right, I feel I have a right to counter, to say something which may not be in line with what your beliefs are. And there is no security coordination. What is likely to happen? Conflicts. And that's why each time we have a request of a permit, we will want to interview, or we will want to get the applicant to come forward. We know where he wants to do the process. We will look at the environment, the route exigence in terms of emergencies, and then once we agree to say that we are going to give out a permit, we will have to provide the protection of the applicant. Because once we give the permit, we make assurance that your life is protected. I want the public to make this point very clear. My office is not the high and the last office with regards to permit insurance. If you think under Section 25, subsection F of the Constitution, made it very clear, explicitly clear, that if the office of the IGP refuses or denies a permit, that issue can be taken to the High Court. And you make a case that the office of the IGP had refused my request, and I think it's not really very genuine. The High Court, looking at it carefully, if they are of the opinion that the denial of the IGP is not genuine, the court can make an order, ordering the office of the IGP to grant permit in that regard. That is by way of observing and respecting the rule of law. Quite often what we have ordinarily nowadays is people put the cart before the horse. You have your program plan, 2-3 days before the program, you put up an application. And the application can be either approved or denied. And where it is denied, you say you are going to go ahead. So I think we should try to do away with that. We want to be very supportive, but at the same time, we have a duty to make sure that whatever is not in our statute, is not the law, should not be allowed to happen in our eyes. Because that constitution that we always rely on is the same laws that also give us the mandate to say that enforce the law where it is enforceable.
Basically, there needs to be dialogue. Dialogue in the sense that if you intend to do any program that will involve the masses and it will involve using the streets and it may block traffic or any other thing, first discuss it with the police and then you sort out those things and then you can now go over to do your program. Is that what you were saying?
Exactly.
Okay, so that means that whoever wants to do any form of protest, demonstration, or use of the public space, you need to consult first.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification. I now turn to the Director of State Intelligence Services, Mr. Usman Sow. Mr. Sow, usually when we talk about security, especially today we are in a democracy, people feel that they can say anything and anywhere and anyhow. As intelligence officers, your office, what is its responsibility in ensuring that while we are expressing ourselves in terms of democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and all these other rights that are fundamental to us as human beings and citizens, that it is within the remits of the law?
Our job every day is to say what is the body health of the country. As we sit here today, our assessment is the country is generally calm and peaceful for everybody living in this country to go about his normal business. That is our assessment up to this morning. But this we also want to thank the Gambian people and those who are living in this country for maintaining the peace and calm in this country. Because in the end, there is peace and security because people are also generally law-abiding. As per our assessment, again, we don't have any threat calling for undue alarm up to this morning. So the country remains, as I said, generally calm. And the indicators are there to see that the country for the past 2.5 years has been generally peaceful. And as a result of which, the indicators are also there. There is an open space, or a wider space, and that is very indicative of, one, the respect for rule of law, and also the democratization process that the country is going on, but also the state of security in this country. That today you have freedom of speech widely and broadly across the spectrum. You have the rule of law. Generally, civil liberties have been opened. The media houses have increased. Press freedom has increased. I think it may look normal to an ordinary eye, but this is very profound in the ongoing security sector reform and the state of affairs in this country. Getting securities, service chiefs, sitting around to discuss security in the open, I think is very, very indicative of the security sector reform that is going. It is ongoing because it's also responding to the calls of the people that security needs to be accountable. And I think this is a form of accounting to the Gambian public. And again, that could not have happened if the security sector was really not transforming or it was not on track. And the involvement of other actors today in security affairs. Day in, day out, you hear people commenting, public commenting, seminars held on security, not typically by the security sector. So there is this also inclusive approach that security is everybody's business, stated or inferred. is really the case now. I mean, and I think that also indicates the state of affairs and the state of security of this country. There is a demonstrated willingness on the part of the securities to reform. Today, we go to the National Assembly to talk to the Standing Committee on Defense and Security Committee. We talk to them. They have a concern, they invite us, we go and speak to them. That is also speaking volumes about the state of security, because security is not only, the absence of war, but the fact that people can go about their normal business without fear. There is peace, negative and positive peace. You can still live in a negative peace where you go to bed, you are in peace, no war, no guns, but you go to bed worried that maybe someone will knock at your door. Or what you've said in the day may affect you in the night. We don't live in that. Now people are held accountable, securities are speaking, and I think, again, that speaks of the security environment among the level of coordination, cooperation, consultation, communication among the security services themselves. Today we are all almost at the same wavelength of information and knowledge. We are able to communicate among ourselves freely and openly, and we are able to respond and support each other. Today, the level of deployment across this country is unprecedented. The presence of security across this country, the length and breadth of this country is very impressive. So that again speaks of the security state. Today, you look at it as the actors in the security sector. We touch wood as a security sector, but we've never had such a competence manning security institutions, carrier security officers in almost every security service. That again is speaking volumes about the security sector. That security is also been highly rated, but also government is highly rating security. But that security cannot also be left in the hands of anybody, because it's very critical. And I think government has recognized that. The establishment of the Office of the National Security Advisor, because this is all in the context of how is the security posture of this country. You've made very important point, very relevant, that if we must reform, we must change business. How were we before and how are we? As I indicated, there are profound activities that are going on. The creation of the Office of the National Security is very, very indicative of these reforms that are going on. Now all the security is coordinated at the Office of the National Security Agency. We've got an appointment of a defense minister for the first time in almost 2.5 decades. That is, again, very, very profound in a message that security is transforming. The appointment of security officials, as I have already covered, governance and oversight, I think I've covered that with the National Assembly, Parliament. The international goodwill towards security today is very high. We are all living witnesses to the number of visits, to the number of intersections, and the topics on the lips of every visiting person in this country, who would hardly complete his discussions without talking about security and supporting the security sector reform. You'll agree that we were one of the most, if not the most loaded office after the change of government. But today I think that has turned very well in a very impressive direction. We have not only cut off on the excesses, we've cut them off. We've not only cut on them, we've cut them off. So we knew when we came our own self-assessment of what is the problem. One of it was the detention and arrest and the abuse of office and powers. That has gone. I think we are all witnesses to that.
I just want to get that clear. Are you telling me that now the SIS officers do not arrest or detain, keep people in detention?
No, we are not arresting, we are not detaining.
Oh, that's good news then. Okay, we move on.
Okay, we are not arresting, we are detaining. We are focused on our core mandate of intelligence collection, analysis and dissemination to inform policy, both home and abroad, whether domestic consumers or our international actors. That's our focus now. Our capacity building as a service has increased. Today we can say in tens, if not nearly hundreds, of our staff, home and abroad, have been trained from diplomas to master's level. And we are aspiring to have even doctors, PhDs in the service. And that is on course. We have deployed across the country. We have come across with communities. Today, our level of collaboration with the Gambian community, and I want to use this opportunity to thank once again the Gambian community for the confidence they have reposed in the service. Today, we are able to go into communities, they accept us, they provide us facilities, they accommodate us, and through our own means and our support, we've been able to collaborate with some communities today to bring in essential services in communities like water in Kirpate. Thanks to our collaboration with that village. Today there is water, and if you know Kirpate, a major trading center in North Bank, in the central Badibu area, is a major trading place. I mean, thanks to our collaboration with them, today there is water throughout the village.
But then, Mr. So, what about if somebody asks, is that the business of the SIS? What do you say?
Well, it's not the business, but we are reciprocating the goodwill. They've accommodated us, they've opened up to us, and we needed water. So we needed water just like them. Again, the SIS is a service, but the bottom line is we are also people. We have needs like everybody. And if we think there's a possibility of collaborating with community to have a shared need to share, well, that may not be our core mandate to be there, but we need to be accepted. As I said, we are the most loaded service or office in this country. So we need to find a way of winning hearts and minds strategies. And this is really one of the ways we are doing it. Today you go to Yorobawol, which is Woolly West for the first time. We are also deploying in the URR North, where they've been kind enough, magnanimous to give us. And we sunk a borehole for our office, and we're sharing it with the community. And that is helpful, because our shared presence or mere presence in those areas is also enhancing security. So that is what we are doing. As I said, zero tolerance on excesses. You will not hear the SIS is knocking at my door or is on duty. Of course, we are watching the bad guys. We want to assure the country that our eyes are on the bad guys. Wherever they may be, we have a mandate to follow them and know what they are up to. Again, that's our job. But generally, if you mean well for this country, you are free to go about your normal business. On the increase in bilateral, as I indicated, our institutional reforms and HR has increased. We are engaging with the DICAF, which is the Democratic Control of Armed Forces, an EU-funded project which we intend to do to carry out some programs in the ongoing reform, restructuring, repositioning, and recasting of the service. Because we need that. We need to recast the service in a way that it is acceptable to one and all. And I think that is on course.
Mr. So would agree with me that twice he has said that he was the organization or institution is probably one of the most loathed of the entire service apparatus. I think I was one of the biggest critics of what used to be the National Intelligence Agency, NIA, the Bamba-Dinka phenomenon and all that. I think for the past 2.5 years, we can say with confidence that the new SIS is absolutely new. Not only have they been watching the bad guys, I think they have also been watching the good guys. In my own community of Banjulnding, I am aware of their activities, and the villagers and people of Banjulnding highly appreciate the great work they are doing. There are schools there. When it was being opened, the Director General went to the villagers, traditional Gambian system. He bought kola nuts and drinks, and he told them, I'm sure you are seeing us going and coming, but I want to come and announce our presence in your community. The people of Banjulnding are now benefiting. This morning I passed by. There is some ongoing construction. We now have lights. We have traffic, what is street lights now. So the whole system is now illuminated. There's a new road there going to their school, and we benefit a lot. Many civil servants live in Banjulnding, and it was hell for us the past 2 years coming to work because of the roads, the potholes and all that. With this road constructed, that has eased the situation. And I think that also contributes positively towards a good security setup. If the people are happy with their roads, at least there will be no demonstration from the people of Banjulnding that they don't have a road. There will be no demonstration that they don't have city lights. Now they even have a road that they have generously also added towards the main hospital in Banjulunding. There was a complaint by the villagers when he came to meet them that they would also appeal to government to help, to ease, because the ambulance was having problems accessing the hospital. That also has been taken care of. So I would say kudos to the SIS. And as we forge ahead, I think what we are seeing is very promising. We don't have arbitrary arrests, arbitrary detention, incommunicado detentions, disappearances, of political enemies, real, passive, or potential. And that's what a good intelligence agency is supposed to be. And I think we're there.
Thank you very much. I think that's important. And I can also add that we have also noticed that the SIS has been on the media more frequently than they would have done in the past. That means that they are right there. They want to communicate to the people. I think that's a good sign that really the country calling for dialogue, calling for conversation is very important. And that happening, I think, is another kudos. But let's move on to the Gambia National Army. Brigadier General Mamad Chan, the issue of security and the army, we have been so used to, as a nation, seeing the army. How does the army fit into the reform in the democratic dispensation?
The Gambia Armed Forces, as you have rightly stated, is one of the central pillars of security in any country, in this country. I think if you go to the genesis of a country, we realize that a country is a territory, which a common population who feels and belong to one another. And in order to express their collective desire for survival, they create political institutions like the state. And one of the pillars of preserving the state is the armed forces. If you look at our 1997 constitution, and before that, all the other constitutions of this country, I think the preservation and the defense of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country is given to the Gambia Armed Forces, which is very important, because you can only talk of a state if there is peace and stability. And in order to have peace and stability, there must be a collective will by everybody, all and sundry. Let me hasten to say here that it is the duty of every citizen in this country to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country. So it is, by extension, a duty of everybody to make sure that we behave civilly, to make sure that we respect the institutions and maintain what is called the rule of law. Because without a rule of law, what you will have is anarchy. It is a state of fear, a chaos, where everybody, the survival of the fittest, like they say. Anybody who feels you are more powerful, you can do what you do. I think if we go to the genesis of a society, we had in a state of nature where everybody had, the right to preserve yourself, to defend your property, etc. And like the great English political philosopher Thomas Hobbes said, in a state of nature, life is short, nasty, and brutus. So you need order. And in order to have order, through the ages, societies have evolved. There had been rule of the king, which was where somebody imposes your will over a people. And it was not also okay. So gradually, as people, as civilization advances, people came with the idea of a democracy. What is a democracy? A democracy is a group of people who institute procedures, rules, which will better serve everybody. But having instituted rules, the mother of which is the Constitution, it becomes binding on everybody, every citizen, to make sure that we safeguard and protect that Constitution. So the creation of the Gambia Armed Forces got its root from the Constitution. Presently, the one in force is the 1997 Constitution as amended. And if you look at Section 186 of that Constitution, it creates for the establishment of the Gambia Armed Forces to be composed of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and such other institutions as may be determined by the people through the National Assembly. Section 186 further bars any citizen or any group within the country from raising an army or a militia for whatever purpose. So what it means again is that everybody must have to act civilly. Section 187 of the same constitution gives certain functions to the Gambia Armed Forces. And as I have stated earlier, the primary function is to preserve and defend the territorial integrity of the country. So if you go beyond that, you also have what is called another duty which we owe to the people through the state, which is in the case of civil strifes, and natural calamities. At the request of the civil authority, it becomes the duty of the armed forces to come to the aid of the civil authority. What it means in our Gambian context, and I think people must be pay attention to this, is that in as much as it is the role of the police to maintain law and order and preserve peace, which we call in the military internal security, the army has a secondary role to come to the aid of the police where there is civil strife, where there is a natural calamity. And this is how we are also interested to make sure that we appeal or we communicate to our fellow citizens to know that, without order, there is chaos. And if there is chaos, it hampers every aspect of life. Somebody said in the conversation here that if you don't have peace and stability, ordinary life as we know it, waking up in the morning, going to your work, either you are a farmer or a businessman, or you want to go to school, it cannot happen. In order to enjoy the tranquility, then it becomes the duty and it behooves everybody to make sure that we as citizens, as patriotic citizens, will also help to maintain that order. Coming back to our role, again, as the Gambia Armed Forces, we also are constitutionally mandated to partake in activities to aid economic development, like engage in agricultural activities, like engaging in provision of health care where there is a gap, like also engaging in road construction and other activities. The same constitution also asks or empowers the Gambia Armed Forces to work towards building harmony and cooperation between the armed members of the armed forces and the civil population, which is what we call in our military, which is our civil-military relationship aspect. What brought this conversation, I think also we are all aware that, 22 years ago, there was a time when the army, ventured into the political domain, which is not the duty of the army. In a democracy, the army is supposed to be and should be and will be in this country under the civilian control, and we are also accountable to civil authority. So since the dawn of this new dispensation, the Army Command, under the leadership of the Chief of Defense Staff, Lieutenant General Masana Kinte, had done very well to make sure that we communicate the same message, that the army is subordinate and accountable to civil authority. We've done certain internal reforms. We've communicated with our men to educate them on what the role of a soldier in a democratic dispensation should be. And that is why I'm sure everybody will agree with me that the presence of the armed forces in the streets had reduced dramatically. We have confined ourselves to our barracks, to our various barracks, to make sure that daily we engage in capacity building, to train our men on the techniques and methods of executing their trade, to also restructure our men into units, into sections, platoons, companies, and battalions. And I must also state here that since the beginning of the new dispensation, we've been able to open a battalion in Kanilai, which was initially very controversial, but as we speak, if you go to Kanilai, the army is doing its constitutional role. It is protecting that sector of our country. We have also had various deployments from Katong all the way to Kalaji, which we call the Tiger Watch deployment. which was premised on the fact that there was a little bit of insecurity at that flank of the country. And thanks to our units that are deployed in these various locations, we have stabilized the situation and people are free to go and come. If you go up country in Basse, we've also opened up and upscale the unit that was there to what we call now the 3rd Infantry Battalion, okay, which has seriously reduced, cattle rustling and the incidents of lawlessness in that area. Okay. We have also in the northern side, we've reinforced our deployments in Farafenye, which is the 2 Infantry Battalion, and as we speak, we have deployments in Yongon, we have deployments in Washu, in the Lamin Koto, and Kudang, and Pakaliba. All this is to make sure that we have a posture to be able to bring, as the security advisor has earlier alluded to, security to the doorsteps of the Gambians. Because initially the thinking was that the military should be state-centric, protect the seat of power. But in a democratic dispensation, in as much as that is important, and it remains our fundamental, one of our key functions, to protect the seat of power, which is the presidency and government institutions in aid to the police. It is also our duty to make sure that every Gambian benefits from security, so that people can go on their normal business. So in a nutshell, Madam Moderator, what we are saying is that the Gambia Armed Forces, is alive to its constitutional mandate. And then we also want to state here that, for a country to progress, there must be prescribed and acceptable procedures, for a succession. There are reforms going on, which is the security sector reform, which has been highlighted by the National Security Advisor, which started with a consultation. Because I think at the dawn of the new democratic era in the Gambia, people were having a lot of issues, not only for the SIS, but also the armed forces. Because the armed forces was seen to be, used by the previous regime to brutalize the Gambian people, which as the things are unfolding on the TRRC, has now come to light that it was not the whole armed forces. It was a particular group of the armed forces which was used extra constitutionally, to suppress the people. I want to assure the Gambians that the Gambia Armed Forces is apolitical. We are a national institution. We recruit our men and women from across the country without discrimination. We want to uphold the nation as a pluralistic society. What it means is that we subscribe to the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, of having equal playing field for everybody. And we will also want to say here that we will be standing firm to make sure that we defend the constitutional order in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cham. I think you've made very clear statements here, especially in the area of the armed forces less seen in the public than before, and that's very important. And the other issue is reaching out to the communities. That's another important aspect to ensure that there is security across the board. And if people feel secure, I think the state itself will feel secure, because it's what people feel, the perceptions that are very important. You want to come in here before we move to the next, because he has raised issues here.
He's my brother.
The only concern I have is the perception about the cattle rustling, especially with the current news we had. I think there is need to reinforce some of those points.
Maybe we need a police station. Well, the Army Chief has talked about a very crucial factor that is so close to my heart. Is a debate still among political scientists and the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. He quoted, he wrote a text in the 18th century called the Leviathan. And in the Leviathan, he argued that the condition of man is a condition of war, of everyone against everyone. Therefore, Hobbes would go on to argue that because of this predicament, we should have very strong laws. The Leviathan is a huge biblical monster in the Bible because it is his belief that man's life without government would be poor, would be nasty, would be brutish, and would be short. However, today, modern political philosophers have a problem with hopes because the metaphor of a Leviathan in a modern day democracy is problematic because a Leviathan is supposed to be this huge biblical monster that was all too powerful, that wouldn't allow people to dissent. And this is why you have philosophers like Locke, and Rousseau and the others, who would modernize political philosophy, that in a democracy, we don't need a Leviathan. What we need is compromise. We need constitutions, the rule of law, institutions that when properly institutionalized, there will be no need to be, an all-oppressive regime. And that is what we are running away from. That's what we had in this country for 22 years. In this country for 22 years, we had a Leviathan, based on Thomas Hobbes' understanding of what society is supposed to be. Because in the state of nature, he said, the condition of man is a condition of war, of everyone against everyone. For 22 years, that was what it was like here. People were rounded up, thrown into jails, taken to forests, buried in ditch holes, shot at. There was no due process. I think since President Barrow's ascendancy to power, we have seen a major difference, a significant difference, that today soldiers are coming before the public gallery to tell the world, I'm sorry, I did this, it wasn't supposed to be done, I was wrong, I was misled by my master. I hope when all these sectors are done and dusted, when all these reforms are done and dusted, in the next 20 years, counting on, we will not see soldiers coming and saying, I did it, it was wrong, I was misled. Today, we have a principal who is very much worried about our past, and he wants to preserve a legacy of good governance, a legacy where the army, the police, the fire service, the journalists, and everybody see each other as common citizens in common endeavor to move this country to a better place. And it is healthy for us. It's even unimaginable. I'm sure when this tape comes out, Gambians around the world, in the diaspora especially, to see that the army chiefs and the service chiefs are gathered with journalists in a very good dialogue, a conversation about the future of their country. What do we need to make this place a better place? I think that's the whole idea behind this conversation. I am so proud of you, and I hope, based on what you have said, we will continue to have this dialogue, and maybe later on we can even take it to the communities, to our bantabas, that all of you can be gathered and be giving lectures and be having conversations with our local communities. Because all too often, most things are done in Banjul. Most of the people in the provinces don't speak English. So when we localize these things, and we have programs in Mandinka, in Wolof, in Fula, in Jola, it would also be better, so that we can communicate to the entire population.
Thank you very much. I think that's an important point. And as you said, we've started, and we hope that we'll be able to continue, not only with the security sector, but other reforms taking place, because you have the public service reform is also going on. All those things are going on. So we'll be looking at these things from the perspective of institutional responsibility and to move forward as a